In Flanders Fields by John McCrae.
In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead shot days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and well loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall sleep though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
I remember my granddad's Les Butcher, who served in the Royal Navy throughout World War II. He served on the HMS Ajab, Newfoundland, and the FFA. During his service, he earned 5 different medals. He joined the Navy when he was just 17 and a half. My grandma Mary was 15 when she evacuated from Hull to Driffield. With her twin sister, she swept the streets to help. They were married after the war ended.
I'm remembering my great-great-uncle, Dick Sutherland, who died in the First World War. He was one of 10 children. Also, my Uncle Spencer used to be in the Navy in submarines, and he is still alive now. My great-grandfather, W. William Percy, his 3 brothers and a brother-in-law, went to fight in the First World War, and they all came home safely. He was one of 11 children. My dad's cousin, Nick Duggarby, used to be in the RAF looking after missiles.
I'm remembering my great-great-granddad, Charles H. Richardson, who survived a bullet in his right arm whilst fighting in France, a gunshot in the back in 1916, and a gunshot in his legs in 1917, which finally sent him home. He was awarded lots of medals. He stayed in the army until 1919. My other great-great-granddad, John Thomas Whitaker, was in the war during 1914 to 1918 and survived the war. Then he became a special policeman during the Second World War.
I'm remembering my great-great-granddad, Norman Hedward, who was in the Royal Navy. I'm remembering my great-granddad, John Eliza Grimshaw, who was in 1893 and died during 1980. At the age of 19, he enlisted with the Lancashire Fusiliers. He later became a Lance Corporal and was responsible for maintaining contact between the headquarters aboard HMS Eurowise and their neighbouring units. Due to his action on the W Beach, he was recommended for the Distinguished Conduct Medal. He managed to overcome fighting in the Gallipoli campaign, but finally, because he had frostbite, he was sent home to England. Whilst he received the Distinguished Conduct Medal and was presented with a gold watch, he then went back to serve in France, India, Arabia, and Ireland.
I am remembering my great-grandma, who was a Wren in the war and is still living at the age of 98. I am also remembering my great-grandfather, who was a Home Guard, also my great-great-uncle, who was in the Navy.
I am remembering my great-granddad was Arthur Fisher from Newcastle. He got called up to the army and joined the East Yorkshire Regiment in World War II. Whilst he was in the army, he got posted to India, France, and Germany. When he was at war, he was posted with two brothers, Reg and Bud Waits. They had a sister called Olive, who Arthur became pen pals with whilst he was fighting in the war. When the war was over, Arthur left the army and met her in York Station for the first time. He fell in love straight away and they got married. This was the beginning of their life together in Driffield. To remember him, we have 4 medals, 2 stars and 2 circles. This is the story of Arthur Fisher.
I am remembering my great-great-grandfather, Thomas Nikoval, who fought in World War II. He fought in Warsaw against the German army, who bombed towns and villages in Poland. He joined the army to protect Poland and wore a special uniform and had weapons. Unfortunately, he was shot a few times and badly injured. He was shot in the shoulder and one bullet traveled through his cheek and came out of his mouth. He survived, but he couldn't go back to the army. He went back home.
I am remembering my great-great-great-granddad Wilson, who was in World War I. He was a tailor and made clothes for soldiers. He made the fabric for the blimps, which were playing the English Channel, to prevent enemy planes coming to England and bombing us.
I am remembering my great-granddad Bell, who was in World War II. He was part of the RAF Bomber Command aircrew. He manned the guns and fired shots at the Germans. My granddad survived this war. I am also remembering my great-granddad Bottrell, who also survived World War II. He was in the army known as the Forgotten Army. He was trained to navigate through jungles and engage the Japanese army behind enemy lines in Burma. I also have a great-uncle, Edward Cherry, who was in the RAF. He was a corporal. He fought in the Falklands War and the Iraq War.
I am remembering my great-grandma of 95, who was a field girl in the Second World War. Her parents owned a farm, so she helped around it. When the Second World War came, they took in girls to help gather crops. Back in those days, they had to do everything by hand.
Remember Me by Harry Riley. Duty called and I went to war, though I'd never fired a gun before. I paid the price for your new day, as all my dreams were blurred away. Remember me. We all stood true as the whistles blew and faced the shell and stench of hell. Now battle's done, there is no sound, our bones decayed beneath the ground. We cannot see or smell or hear, there is no death or hunger or fear. Remember me. Once we like you would laugh and talk and run and walk and do the things that you all do. But now we lie in roast so deep beneath the soil beneath your feet. Remember me. In mud and gore and the blood of war, we fought and fell and moved no more. Remember me, I am not dead, I am just a voice within your head.
My great-granddad William Marsden spent time in the British Army. However, we do not know much about him as he passed away when my nana was 16. Both of my great-grandmas spent time in the Land Army during World War II, working on local farms while the men were fighting. My uncle Jason served in the British Army for 20 years. How old were you? Why did you join the army and how old were you when you joined? I was 17 when I joined and I had always wanted to be in the army. And there was a recession at the time and there were not many jobs around. What was your job in the army? There were no set jobs to begin with, but I became a military driver, learning to drive every vehicle possible. Did you visit any foreign countries during your time in the army? I went to Cyprus, Qatar, Canada, Kuwait, but spent most of my post in Germany and Ireland. Did you take part in any wars? I served in the Iraq War. It was very sunny, but not a nice place to be. I also served in Northern Ireland during the IRA uprising.
Grandad Arthur Fisher. He got called up and was in the East Yorkshire Regiment. He was in World War II and he was posted to India, France and Germany. He was a soldier in the army and left as soon as he could after the war ended. He previously worked at the ironworks in Newcastle. And this is the story of my great-granddad.
My dad is an army soldier. He has served in the Gulf War 2006 and in Northern Ireland. He has 4 medals in total. My great-great-granddad Arthur Scaife had 2 brothers called Robert and William Scaife, who both served and died in the First World War. Robert died of wounds at a POW camp in Germany in 1914. William Scaife was born in 1897 and he is my great-great-uncle. He was in the 2nd Battalion of the East Yorkshire Regiment and was the rank of private. William was killed in action during the Battle of Ypres in 1915, age 18. He is listed at the Memorial at Menin-Gates, Belgium. My great-great-granddad, Frederick Legger Oliver, was born in 1880. Frederick was in the East Yorkshire Regiment in the 7th Battalion. He died on the first day of the Battle of the Somme on the 1st of July 1916. He left behind a wife and 4 children.
Tom Curson has lived in Penistone for the past 25 years. He was born in Battersea, London, and lived at a place called Perridale and Greenford. When a war broke out, he was nearly 19. He decided to wait until October 1914 before joining the forces because that was the last year of his apprenticeship. Tom was ready to join the armed forces in October 1942. Tom Curson left Newquay and went to Henton Park near Manchester, then on to Blackpool. One day, Tom's squadron received a message that the American army was being held up at Tyre on Rhine and requested that Germany position holding them up should be bombed.
Great-grandfather Duggleby, William Percy and 3 brothers plus a brother-in-law all went to fight in the First World War and they all came home safely. He was one of 11 children. My dad's cousin Nick Duggleby used to be in the RAF, Royal Air Force, looking after missiles. He still works with missiles now as a private contractor. Also, my uncle Spencer used to be in submarines in the Navy.
My great-granddad was in the Merchant Navy. He carried food in ships trying to get all around Europe. He was born in 1918. He joined the Merchant Navy in 1937. Between 1939 and 1946, he served with distinction on the Atlantic and Russian convoys. He was also a fool in the D-Day landing. Great-granddad George married great-grandma Lillian in 1944, but he couldn't have a proper honeymoon because he had to get back on his ship 2 days afterwards. He received 3 medals for what he did in the war.
Anthem for doomed youth.
What passing bells for these who die as cattle?
Only the monstrous anger of the guns, only the stuttering rifles' rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers, nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells. And bugles calling for them from sad shires.
What candles may be held, speed for more.
Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dust of the drawing down of night.
I remember my great-granddad. He joined the Air Force on the 14th of February 1944 and left on the 5th of May 1947. He learned to fly in a Whitley. On the 15th of January 1945, he started flying a Halifax bomber at Rutherford in York. His last flight was on the 27th of October 1945, which was the end of the war. He lived near two friends. One was in the army, the other was in the Navy. They all met up again after the war.
I am proud of Gary Bagnall, my great-great-uncle. He served for 23 years from 1972 to 1995 in the 17th and the 21st Lancers, and then the 16th and the 5th, the Queen's Royal Lancers, reaching the rank of the Regimental Sergeant Major or Warrant Officer Class 1. During his career, he served in many countries, including Cyprus, Germany, Northern Ireland, and was on the front line during the First Gulf War in Iraq in 1990. Codename Operation Desert Shield, which led to Operation Desert Storm. Whilst on active service, he received the General Service Medal with class for service in Northern Ireland, the United Nations Medal for service in Cyprus, the Gulf Medal 1990-1991 for service in the First Gulf War, and the Long Service and Good Conduct Medal.
I remember my great-granddad Alan Jewett Gradwell when the Second World War started. He was still at school in 1942. When he was 18, he was conscripted into His Majesty's forces. He did his training as a gunner in the Royal Artillery. He then trained for the invasion of Europe. In December 1944, at 20 years old, he fell ill and never returned to Europe. He was transferred to the Black Watch and started training for services against Japan. However, Japan surrendered before he got there. He ended up in Egypt and Palestine, trying to keep peace between the Arabs and the Jews. His time ended in 1947 when he was lucky to come home when thousands did not. We should never forget what happened.
I remember my great-grandfather, Edward Malkin, who was born 22nd of May 1902. He enlisted in the army in May 1919, having lied about his age. He served in the army both here and in India until 1925, and is an army reserve until 1939. He was mobilised in January 1940 and became a member of the British Expeditionary Force as a gunner. He was evacuated from the beaches of Dunkirk on the 28th of May 1940. He was released from the army in 1945, having served 26 years and 118 days.
I remember my great-granddad Ted Godding. He served as a map reader in the army in World War II.
I remember my great-grandma, Agnes Edith Kirk. She was a member of the Women's Auxiliary Service in World War II. She helped make parachutes for the Air Force. She lived until she was 78.
I am proud of my Uncle Ben, who is currently serving Her Majesty the Queen. He has served in Afghanistan.
I am very proud of my dad because he is in the Royal Navy and he has been serving in the Royal Navy for 20 years. He has been on 5 ships to date, and even though he didn't come home for months at a time during his deployments, and although we missed him greatly, we understood he had a very important job to do and that he would return to us. He joined the Royal Navy on the 2nd of October 2000, and his first ship was HMS Monmouth. He then joined HMS Newcastle, HMS Portland, which he served on for 9 years, HMS Montrose, which he joined when I was only 8 weeks old, and his previous Plymouth-based ship was HMS Ocean. When he returned from his last deployment from HMS Ocean, we were in the national and local newspaper.
For the Fallen by Lawrence Bingham. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall our ours. To the end they remain.
My great-great-granddad was a commander desert rat at rank of sergeant in World War II. Whilst in North Africa, 2 of his comrades were killed in conflict and were lying dead in a derelict cottage behind enemy lines. My great-great-granddad wanted to bring them back home and not leave them there to be mutilated by the enemy. He decided to go it alone and retrieve the 2 dead soldiers, his brothers, as they would say. He was ordered not to go, but due to his beliefs, he went and retrieved both brothers so that they could be repatriated back home. Due to my great-great-granddad's actions, he was stripped of strips for putting his own life in danger. Later, after a martial hearing, he had the sergeant's strips hesitated due to his bravery and compassion of his serving brothers. When my granddad asked his granddad, "Were you scared at the time of your actions?" he said yes, but somebody had to bring them back home. I could not leave them there. They would have done the same for me. He never talked about the event again to my granddad.
April 1922. Before the war, Henry was a telegram boy for the post office. When the war broke out, he joined the Royal Navy, where he worked as a signalman. He survived his boat being sunk by a German torpedo and served during the whole of World War II. Joseph Ernest Catley, date of birth the 23rd of January 1915. He joined the army when war broke out. He was stationed in Cairo, Egypt, in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. His job was to make all the army vehicles, example tanks and lorries, desert-proof, so they could deal with difficult terrain, particularly sand. Nellie Spavin, date of birth 21st of November 1920. Well, she worked on the London airfield as part of the WAF, Women's Auxiliary Air Force, where she was responsible for changing the camera film on the Spitfires used to record the action.
My great-granddad, Sergeant Harold Kilford, he had a serial number which was 629704. He fought in the Second World War in 1939 to 1945. He was stationed in India in 1945. He was a physical training instructor. He won the Defence Medal and the War Medal. He helped the airmen get fit for work.
My great-granddad was Lance Bombardier Ronald Edward John Little. He served in the Royal Artillery during World War II. During the war, he served in North Africa and Italy. My granddad Michael Frank Philip Little, also served in the army. He was in the Royal Signals from 1958 to 1980, serving in Malaya, Germany, and Hong Kong. Whilst in Hong Kong, he served with the Gurkha Signals. 3 of my great-uncles also served in the army. My dad was in the RAF for 23 years, serving in the UK and Cyprus, also the Falklands, Italy, and Afghanistan.
My great-granddad worked his legs while playing football. He wasn't able to join the war. Instead, he worked in an ammunition factory in Coventry. There he met my great-grandmother, who had also been posted there to help the war effort. During the air raids, they used to go in a big massive room underneath the factory. Coventry was one of the worst bombed cities, but they had good times too. In the big shelter, they often had wonderful dances. Then they were married in 1943 at Hinckley Parish Church. My great-grandmother couldn't have a wedding dress because they didn't have enough coupons.
My great-granddad was in the Second World War. He got lots of medals from fighting around the world. He joined the army at 17 and lied about his age because he wanted to fight for his country. His name was Raymond Adey. He went from Africa through Europe. Raymond had 1 medal from Africa, Italy, France, and Belgium. He also had 3 from fighting in the war. Raymond suffered
ESD in the middle of the night. He would jump up and get under the bed and tell Peggy to because he thought bombs were coming. And this infected him for years. I never got to meet him, but he sounded brave.
My great-great-granddad was called Thomas Emwood Lee. He served in the Queen's Own Royal West Kent Regiment. He enlisted on the 27th of September 1938. He was sent to France, but then sent back as he lied about his age and said he was a year older than he actually was. He fought in Africa, Sicily, and Italy. In Italy, he fought at Monte Cassino and then Monte Acqua del Salata. He was awarded the Military Medal and Campaign Medal, the War Medal, and the Defence Medal. He was also mentioned in dispatches twice. He received 2 letters from the King about his medal. He was wounded twice, first on the left shoulder and then in the leg, which meant he couldn't be in the army anymore. My great-grandmother donated his medals to a museum.
My granddad was 10 years old when war started. His father was called up to France and my grandfather was evacuated to the countryside with his brothers and sisters. He joined the army as a bandsman in 1944 when he was 15. He remembers watching British fighter planes shooting German bombers in the skies. My grandma also remembers the war. She can remember having to take a gas mask to school with her and getting into an air raid shelter whenever a siren went off. Her father once had to help put out an incendiary bomb that had exploded in the street. My great-granddad was aged 22 to 28 during World War II. He worked down the pit, so he wasn't sent to war. He was given the job of a warden. He patrolled the streets, keeping everyone safe, especially when the air raid sirens went off. My great-granddad was in the RAF. He looked after the aeroplanes. My 2 great-uncles were also in the RAF. My great-gran was aged 18 to 24 during World War II. She had a small baby, so she stayed at home to look after him. This was my great-uncle Gerald. My dad's granddad was only 7 years old. His great-granddad went to war, but we don't know anymore.
My great-grandma didn't evacuate with everyone else and stayed with her mum. And that's how she met my great-grandpa.